Welcome back. In this video, we will go to recipe details. The first option that you have is to enable or disable the recipe details header in single page. So if you go to our site, let's drag this tab right next to our working dashboard tab, and we will open one of the single recipes. From here, if you disable the recipe details header toggle, click on Save Changes. Let's go back to our site and give it a refresh. You will see that our header or the recipe header is not displaying anymore. As opposed to when you enable the toggle, click on Save Changes, go back and give it a refresh. Your header will be displayed. Let's go back. The next option is to enable or disable the recipe featured image. If you disable this option, click on Save Changes, go back to your site and give it a refresh. It will not display your featured image, as well as the images that you had added to your gallery will not be displayed anymore. Let's go back, and if you enable this option, click on Save Changes, go back, give it a refresh. Then your featured image as well as the images that you had added to your gallery will be displayed. From here, you can set the ingredient line format. Currently, it is quantity, unit, ingredient, and notes. If you go back to our recipe, scroll down to ingredients, that is how it is: quantity, unit, ingredient, and notes. Now, if you want to change the order of this, let's say you want to add notes right in front of quantity. So I'm going to cut it and paste it right at the front. And let's add quantity. Let's cut it and put it right at the very back. Let's give them some space and click on Save Changes. Now let's go back to our site, give it a refresh. And as you can see, for all of your ingredients, the notes have appeared right at the front, and the quantity is now displaying right at the very back. Let's go back and change it to how it was before. Click on Save Changes. Let's go back, give it a refresh. And as you can see, they have now been placed like how it was before. Let's go back. Now we have global recipe toggles option here. These are various sections that will display on your recipe. You can easily disable the toggle in order to disable the particular section, and enable it to enable them or display them back on to the recipes. If you go back on our recipe card, you can see author, cooking method, cuisine, courses, recipe keys, and the rest of the information that are displaying here. So let's go back and we will just disable the author, courses, cooking method, cuisine, and we will also disable the prep time, cook time, and rest time as well as total time. Click on Save Changes and let's go back, give our site a refresh, and you can see the author name and the rest of the information have disappeared. So with this option, you can easily choose the sections that you wish to display on your recipe card. If you enable them back on, click on Save Changes, go back and give it a refresh. The informations have now appeared back on the recipe card except for author. So let's go back and enable our author and courses as well. Click on Save Changes. Go back, give it a refresh. The author and cooking method are also displaying here. Now, if you come down, here is one important option, that is to enable or disable the Mark as Complete option. Let's go back. For each of the instructions, you can also enable the mark as complete option. What that will do is that will help your visitors follow up with their instructions. So after they are done with instruction number 1, they can easily click on the mark as complete option and disable or blur the instruction number 1, then move on to instruction number 2. Let's see how we can do that. So back to our dashboard, just enable the mark as complete option, click on Save Changes, go back and give it a refresh. Now you can see the mark as complete option is displaying on your recipe card. After your users are done with instruction number 1, they can click on mark as complete and it will display as complete. And they can follow the same with the rest of the instructions. This will make it very easier for your users to follow up with your recipes, and this is also very interactive and user-friendly option. I would recommend you to enable this toggle. Let's go back. Another option is you can also allow your visitors to add the recipes to favorites. If you have an earlier version of the plugin, then we recommend you to update your plugin to enable this feature. Let me show you add to favorites option on the site. So if you go over to your site, you can find the add to favorite option, the button actually enabled on your single recipe. And if you go over to one of the pages, let's go to cooking methods. You can find this ribbon icon, and if you hover your mouse over this, you will find the option to add to favorites. With the help of this option, or this button rather, your visitors will be able to click on the recipes to add to their favorites. So for you to enable these buttons along with the button that I showed you earlier on your single recipe, you have to come back to recipe details option and you have to enable this button. If you do not enable this button, let's disable this button for a while and click on Save Changes. If you go back and give your page a refresh, you will see the Add to Favorites button has disappeared. And if you go to Cooking Methods page once again, scroll down, you will no longer find the Add to Favorites button on your recipe images. If you go back and enable this option, click on Save Changes, come back and give your site a refresh, then you will find the button is enabled once again. And it is also enabled on your single recipe. Let's go back. Along with this option, you can also edit the default text or label of each of these options. So let's say if you do not want the author label to be here, if you want to add something else instead of author, you have to click on this pencil icon and you can edit the default text or the label for each of the options that you have here. So instead of author, let's say you want to add in something else. Recipe author or something else, you can just type in here. Click on Save Changes. Now if you go back, instead of author, give it a refresh, you will find recipe author. Let's go back. So this is how you can change it. I'm going to remove the recipe and I'm going to change it back to how it was before, but you can easily change the label of any of the text that are available here by simply clicking on this edit button over here. Let's click on Save Changes. Next is the recipe navigation. If you go back and scroll down, this is the recipe navigation. If you go back to the dashboard and disable this option, click on Save Changes, go back and give it a refresh. The recipe navigation will not be displayed anymore. Similarly, you can also make your recipe card powered by option disappear. If you go back to your dashboard and disable this option, click on Save Changes, go back and give it a refresh. You will see the recipe card powered by options are disabled or they are not showing anymore. As opposed to when you go back and enable both options by enabling the toggles here, click on Save Changes, go back, give it a refresh, and you can see they have been enabled, both the options, the recipe navigation as well as the powered by card option. Next, if you go to the top, you can also make the author appear or disappear. If you go back and you disable the toggle here, click on Save Changes, go back and give it a refresh, the author will not be displayed anymore. Similarly, you can also make the published date disappear. Go back and disable the display recipe published date toggle. Click on Save Changes, go back, give it a refresh, and that will also not be displayed anymore. You can also disable or enable to display the comments. If you disable this option, click on Save Changes, go back and give your recipe a refresh. The comment count section will not be displayed at the top and the comment section will also not be displayed at the bottom. Let's enable all three options. Click on Save Changes, go back, give it a refresh, and all the three options are now displaying here. Let's go back. Next, you can also enable or disable the image crop in the featured image of your single recipe and recipe archive pages by enabling or disabling the toggles here. So by default, the images are cropped as per the theme's predetermined image size. But if you disable this option, it will disable to auto crop the featured image in the featured image of the single recipe as well as the recipes in Recipe Home Archive and search pages. If you click on Save Changes, go back, give it a refresh. As you can see, the changes in the featured image is not shown because the image that I have used is according to the recommended image sizes for the theme. But if your image is not as per the recommended image sizes, then it will not automatically crop your image size if you disable the toggles here. I will enable them back on. Next is to enable the pin it button in all of the recipes in your recipe archive and search pages. So if you go back on your recipes featured image, you will see the pin it options. You will also find it in the recipes that are displaying on the home page currently. If you disable the pin it button option, click on Save Changes, go back and give it a refresh. You will see the pin it option is not available on your featured image for your recipes. If you enable them back on, click on Save Changes, go back and give it a refresh, then the pin it button will be displayed. It is the same for all of the recipes that are on your home, recipe and search pages. Let's go back. So that was it about the recipe details. In the next video, we will go to recipe archive page.